Hi everyone, welcome back. This is the usual stream for programming, or writing a programming language in Rust. So the project as it stands is to write a research aimed programming language called Seed, which will be the basis for other programming languages and ideas to play around with. And so far, most of the language has been implemented at this point. I have been doing a number of refactorings of the existing code at the moment, though, to revamp how assignments are done in particular. So previously we were essentially updating bindings in scopes so that the scopes themselves contained new, what I'm calling boxes. Now boxes mean something slightly different in Rust, but just conceptually we were replacing the box. Whereas with this refactoring, we're now changing the thing that's inside the box. So it's a little more, I guess, intuitive somewhat in terms of the mechanics and things like that. And hopefully will optimize the code a little bit better. And also might make some language features, particularly one of the last language features that I'm hoping to implement in this language is operator assignment. And the hope is that the refactoring I've done recently will help simplify that in particular. And with all that said, just a quick comment on the environment I'm using. I do all of this on a remote server that I connect to using Mosh. I split the session using tmux, and then I have entr, I guess enter, running on the top right pane, which will rerun the tests and linters whenever a change gets made to the source code or tests. I have source code up on the top left here. I just use plain Vim with a Nerd Tree plugin. And then on the bottom left, I have Bash. And I'm going to close that pane. I don't really need it for anything. It was mostly for killing rogue processes when deadlock occurs in the right hand pane. And what I'm working on now is really just fixing up. I'm just putting a reminder to myself now that I think would actually, I might set up a debug variable to help me swap from using locks on mutexes to try locks and actually kill the process if a lock can't be achieved. So in production, I would probably want to change that over so that a deadlock does occur, that you're not panicking. Or maybe it would be worth making that a process that can be changed based on a parameter. So maybe there's a parameter to the interpreter at some stage that says, okay, if there's going to be a deadlock, quit the program instead and crash the program rather than blocking. So there might be some scenarios where that's preferable. But going back to where we are now, I had just gotten it to the point last time where I had resolved the last few, I think, bugs in the latest implementation of these updates. And essentially what I'm going to do now is run through those changes and clean them up and hopefully just do a commit. And that will hopefully allow us to move on to the operator assignment functionality. So I'm going to abstract this line, I think, or will I? The main reason I want to do that is because there's a similar call in bind, and I don't want bind to have details of these kind of assignments. I don't want this kind of functionality to be in bind, but I'll have to see how easily I can expose that. try it like this. What does copy return actually? And that will give us a good signal. It returns a valref with source as well. And this isn't going to return anything, not even an error. And a bit of a, seems like somewhat of a silly abstraction because it does so little, but it does mean that if I'm updating how assignments get performed in the future, I'll just need to update it in one place. So there is a benefit. I would tend to, well, it varies. I would tend to focus on keeping like not overdoing the dry principle these days, and I would tend to inline things a lot more. I mean, when I was getting started with programming, you just do everything inline almost, and then you learn about clean coding principles and dry, and then you try to abstract everything. Whereas these days I feel like it's more about getting that happy balance. So, what is slot in this context? So if we have new v as well, I'll get rid of those. So that's a copy of v. Well, that's declaring the item, getting the item, assigning the item. Okay, I'm not getting much type information from here. Maybe I need to do it like that because I think that's what I receive when I get a mutable item from a map. Okay, sure. So I should have left the linter finish running. And I would be expecting an error here. Oh no, I wouldn't be because the dereference is happening down here instead this time. That lock is taking a while, so in the meantime I will go ahead and set up the same setup over here. Is it always going to be a copy when I'm doing this assignment? So maybe I will abstract out the copy as well, we'll see. Okay, so that seemed to compile. For the moment, I'm actually going to disable the Clippy run after the check runs, just so that we speed up our little loop. Not in value argue it's in scope. Yeah, and that works, and all the tests pass. So what I might go ahead and do is, well, I'll just double check what our changes are looking like. And I think I can get rid of that match eval expression 2 at the top of, I think that was just being used for debugging purposes. We shall see shortly. No, we'll need to keep that around for the moment. What was this doing differently? I think it was just the print line, the debugging setup, so I should be able to just replace that with that. Okay, and here's an assignment that's working a little differently. It's not using the copy, so we need to take a look at how that's going to be handled. So this is using the copy, and the index update is using the copy. Yeah, and it's only 2 files that have really been updated in this set of changes. Or I might be replacing this whole piece actually. Yeah, because this is what was being done before, which is the same as that as well. So I think this whole abstraction gets replaced. Cool, so everything's passing nicely, and because that Just lost my train of thought. But because that copy is being used fairly universally, I'll be able to add that to the abstraction as well. But I will actually make it a method of scopes in the end, because it's going to be using the copy method, and so this will make that a little bit easier. And yeah, do I still need clone there, I wonder? I'll just see what happens when I remove it. Yeah, I don't think it's possible to remove clone. But because we've got the valref with sources, it's not such a big deal to clone it anyway, I think. Now, this probably isn't so nice. Is there a reason why we always have to clone the immutable values? It's because everything's behind an arc mutex, which has to be done to kind of get around Rust's lifetime rules. And so variables never contain actual values, they only contain pointers to values. And so when we copy a value from one variable to another, we need to make sure to copy the value as well. That should be all right. And that's more or less it for the scope module, I believe. And that should be basically it for the bind module, other than removing all the debugging stuff. So this is working. So we have some code to work around the fact that a property might not exist in the target object, and that's actually something that I want to change the implementation of shortly. Oh yeah, and we have to update bind range index as well. And I have a to-do for assigning to keys. Oh no, that's something else. So this will be a bit of now whether I would implement that in this language or wait until the more novel language, I'm not sure. Like for the language I'm working on, I don't want it to be too controversial, so to speak. It's just going to be fairly standard language features that are quite ubiquitous at this stage. So maybe I will add that for the next language, which is Ash. So for that, require declaring keys before they're used. And that's more or less it, other than the note that I made before, which was binding range indexes. So now for these, I'm essentially going to need to go through each item and do set valref value. Maybe I'll rename that function, or that method rather. should be a fairly straightforward conversion. Not quite. We would need it to be 0 to range length, and then let target be start plus source. Or will we call it I and J? No, J is usually for an inner loop. Yeah, I like the, how would you call it, mirroring, or the, yeah, there's a word there but I can't remember it, but the matching of source and target to each other. So items isn't in scope, so it will be LHS items. Can I take a reference to that? Because it's going to get copied anyway, or should be fine to do a clone. In fact, this RHS is going to get, oh no, it's a reference to the list. It's a reference to the object in the next one as well. But at the top we take the full value. So I get the feeling that we should be able to just consume that item. Yeah, so we're probably getting a reference from here. Yeah, I'll just clone it, even though we don't really need it. Cool, and that is basically it for the implementation. All that's left then is to commit it and run the linters and things. So we'll get the linters running. Oh, I changed the order there. That's fine. Although so let's see, 376 loop variable source is used to index RHS items. So we can put a big load of line noise to make it simpler. Possibly don't even need to do range length. I can just do that much, and that would give a little less line noise, I think. Yeah, I still need the clone. Cool, and I think there was one more Clippy issue. Okay, so there's 3 more now. And the rest of those are in scope. Self isn't used here. So I can change that to copy like this, and we'll just go ahead, and I don't think we need to expose that anymore either. We'll see, I'm not sure yet. And then line 72, which isn't line 72 anymore. New valref with source. Do I not need to clone it or something? Oh, yeah. So let's give that a go. Again, self is no longer used, so that can be put down there. Now this one is used in other modules, so I'll have to update those calls. Were there any warnings there? No, we're all good. Cool, and let's see if there's any debugging, like leftover debugging stuff in the tests. Those all look fine. And I'll add tests, and I'll just double check that they're fit for committing. Yeah, again, no debugging symbols in there. So we're finally good to commit that. So let's see if I try and summarize this commit. that's that. And we're now ready to take a look at what's left in the Scratch file. So we did that. Required declaring keys, we'll do that in Ash. Use try lock instead of lock. That we can do a little later. Prevent assignment keys, we'll do that a little later. And what we'll do in that case is try to implement operator assignment, which is what set us off on this gigantic detour in the first place. So let's see, where do we go for that? That would probably be in mod eval. And I think a lot of these files can be, a lot of the temporary files that I have here can be deleted just to do a bit of cleaning up. Although that one can probably be kept around. This has object gathering. I don't think I need that anymore. Yeah, like I believe I have that already implemented. That's nothing special. Imports could be kept around for the moment. Get rid of mod, get rid of the implementations of scope. AST can be gotten rid of. Yeah, and the project is a little bit cleaner now. Cool, and I believe all those files were backed up in Git anyway. It was just, I was just keeping some temporary files around so I could reference back more easily, but we've more or less re-implemented the language at this point, so it wasn't so important to keep those around. So, operator assignment. This was the big one. So we have LHS. If we take a look at ASTs, we can see that LHS is an expression, RHS is an expression, and we also have the operation. So what are we going to want to do here? So the big change being when we perform, once we've evaluated the expression, we're not going to want to necessarily bind name. We are going to want to perform an assignment. Now, I don't much like the idea of moving kind of assignment and binding functionality or having it in mod. I'd rather have all of it centralized in bind.rs because that's the whole responsibility of that module. But it might just be easier to do it that way. I can't really think of a like it would be possible to put that stuff into bind, but it would probably make it more complicated with very little return on that investment. So let's take this. So we know that the left hand side is going to be a valref with source. Do we still need to clone that value, I wonder? Probably because we're using it afterwards. Well, maybe, we'll see. Oh yeah, so yeah, we will clone the value for the sake of it. Well, let's try, and we have new valref from value because that returns a raw value. And let's try that. Yeah, slot is not found. Okay, lots of issues. Let's see, can we break these down? So this is interesting because we no longer need the left hand side to be just a variable name, so we should be able to remove all of that. And name location is only used in those places. So we'll also be able to remove that error now. Clippy should remind us to go back and remove that. We no longer need the left hand side location. Hi Sionix, welcome to the channel. So we'll change that to mutable, alright, so that we can modify it in set valref. And is that it? Oh no, there is a deadlock. I wonder what's causing that. That's interesting. I wasn't expecting there to be a deadlock. Thanks for the question. So the language that I'm I'm actually writing a programming language here. The language I'm implementing it in is Rust, and then the language that I'm developing is called Seed. So at the moment, Seed is just a collection of fairly typical language features that I'll be using as a base to make other languages that are maybe a bit more interesting and novel. Thanks for the question. So we need to go ahead and kill these processes. We'll probably have to kill a few more. Oh, is this going to go through a lot of them? Okay, that's all of them. Yeah, of course. Please feel free. I'll do my best to answer. So we've got a lot of calls to locks. I possibly want to replace a lot of these with try locks. Okay, so there aren't actually so many in this file. Let's check out bind. Same over here. A lot of them have been thankfully abstracted into deref and mutable deref. Tips to give someone who's learning software development or coding in general. Yeah, it's a good question. And I would say there are two big things that I would give to anyone, say, getting started in this field. And the first one is probably the most important. I guess it's one that relates to lots of things, not necessarily software in particular, but it does really apply to software, and that is to pick goals. And the reason that I say that is that with software development, it is such a huge field. I mean, I almost compare it to, not like any discipline that you can take in the real world. So you can look into any sciences, you can look into music, there's the domain of exercise. All of these kind of things almost have their own parallel within software. And then there are also software specific domains such as security, networking, apps, all of these kind of things. So it's a world in and of itself. And that can be quite overwhelming in the sense of if you're wanting to get started off and learning things, there are so many shiny things to pursue. It can be sometimes it's very easy to get caught in rabbit holes or to watch lots of videos on different topics but not actually make any specific progresses towards the end goals when you don't have those goals. So a very typical goal for someone getting started in development is to work at a software company. I think that's a good one. It's very targeted and it gives you a very measurable outcome. You know if you got a programming job or not. And also it gives you something to work towards. So if I know I want to get into a specific company, I can research what are the languages that they do, what are the kind of things that they develop. So do they focus on apps? Is it mobile? Is it web? Is it software as a service? Things like that. So you can build up a very solid goal for yourself, which then allows you to be very practical about the things that you are then doing, because when you're building practice projects and things like that, those will all be measured against your goal, and that goal can change over time, of course. As with any of these kind of things, it's worth being flexible, but to try and make sure that there is some kind of guiding star to your development can help a lot, I believe, in just making progress in general in software, because like I say, there's just so much that you can do. And then the second thing is it's a tricky one, because in general we do want to be disciplined about the things that we work on. We want to write, when we are working on software, we want to write clean code, we want to use best practices, we want things to be secure, we want things to be fast and optimal. But the thing is, there are only so many hours in a day. And it's very easy to get sucked into analysis paralysis and get so focused on cleaning things and making sure that things are perfect that we never actually make, again, meaningful progress. And so as much as possible, I would follow the principle of, number one, make it work. And then number two, make it pretty fast, what have you. But always focus on making it work first. So if you're writing a program, you're writing an app, an app that actually does something meaningful. It might be slow, it might be kind of ugly, all these kind of things. But if it's actually doing the thing, like providing value, that's, to me, generally a better app than one that looks fantastic, is super fast, super slick, but doesn't really do anything. And it kind of goes back to another point that I think we as software developers can get focused on is, again, making sure that we're using the best language, best tools, the cleanest code, all these kind of things. And those things are great. It's very useful for us as developers. They're languages we like to use, and they're, if we keep our code clean, it can make bugs easier to resolve and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you're talking about end users and things like that, and people who are actually going to be using the things that you build, lots of those things don't really matter. They don't really care whether it's written in Python, Ruby, JavaScript, Java. It could very well be written in COBOL or APL as far as they're concerned. But if it's providing value to them, I would say, I would have been someone who was very focused on the details before, and I still am to a certain extent, but I try not to let that get in my own way and block my progress. I try to, if I'm getting stuck on things that ultimately don't really make too much of a difference, I try to just make a decision and move on. So those would be kind of the two things I would recommend to, first of all, for someone getting into any field really, is to pick goals and use those to kind of guide your learning. And then the second one is, try not to sweat the details in terms of, get the thing working first and then start worrying about, edge cases, security fixes, all these kind of things, making it pretty, making it fast. Those things can come afterwards. Get something working first. So hopefully people get some value out of that anyway. Of course, we've all been there. I think learning the first language in particular, and learning our first frameworks and things like that, it can be a very different way of thinking. So hopefully you get some value out of what I was saying. And you're very welcome. So with that all said, I still have my issue that I'm working through, which is now that this is resulting in a bit of deadlock, but hopefully now that I'm using try-locks around the place instead of lock. So whereas lock will deadlock and try-lock will raise a panic, and we're still getting the issue. So we're gonna have to do a lot of process killing. I was just thinking, if these were all part of the one process group, that would also make it a little easier to kill all of them, but it is what it is. At least it's not too cumbersome. What other places do I even have locks? Oops, where have I gone now? Do I have Silver Searcher or something these days? Like ripgrep? AG? No. Oh well, I must have installed it somewhere else. I'm just wanting to look in source. I don't really need it anywhere else. So let's see. Source eval mod, and I think I've replaced it in all those places, and also in scope. Avoiding coding by myself because I'm scared of not getting anything done. I mean, those are very relatable feelings. And I would say when it comes to overthinking, I mean, the idea of, or even the phrase analysis paralysis is fairly often bandied about in programming forums because it's so relatable. And I think a lot of people do get so, because it's a very cognitive process in general, programming, we're stuck in our heads, and so we can really, yeah, like you say, start overthinking. And so that's why I think it's worth trying to apply this principle of getting something working first and then worrying about tidying it up later. I think that's really important because we do spend so much time trying to think about the best way of doing things and then just getting stuck. And a nice thing to even help you, again, may or may not, but something that could help is to kind of time box yourself when you get stuck on problems. So there are certain problems where, you know, it's more lack of information or lack of knowledge. I don't know how to achieve this thing. And those kind of cases, that is a tricky one. I mean, previously Stack Overflow would have been the thing to help out with those. I think the development of ChatGPT is a very useful tool for those kind of scenarios as well, because it can help you learn what you don't know and help you work around and through problems. But in the case where where there are different options and you just don't know which one to go for, you can give yourself maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes, an hour, or basically just set a deadline on a decision. And once that time hits, that's, you know, you're going to make a decision one way or the other. It's not going to be the best decision, but it'll be a decision. And the thing that we always forget is we can always come back later and change the decision if we really want to and need to. But it's just to get you through those deadlocks. But yeah, what you're describing there is very relatable, and I certainly went through that when I was getting into programming first as well. Avoiding homework because I have the knowledge but don't know how to apply it to coding itself. That is a tricky one, all right. And it is one of those scenarios where there's a big difference between theory and practice. And it really is one of those ones where with programming, it doesn't really matter how much you know the stuff, because it's a very applied science. You have, it's a matter of just keeping solving problems, writing projects and things like that. Unfortunately, like, knowing stuff is useful and nice, but even things like big O notation don't really matter so much if you can't actually write a program with a nested for loop. It's more important to know, first and foremost, to be able to do the thing than to know everything about it. So if you were kind of dividing up your time between learning how to do stuff and actually doing stuff, I would say focus more on just kind of getting down and dirty and working through things. Exactly. The knowledge will come with time anyway, and the knowledge will be more practical in that sense anyway, because you'll actually be able to see how that applies in practice. LeetCode and environments like that are very good for just being able to, okay, here's a problem, let's just do it. I mean, back in my day, we did, and like, I feel like a dinosaur when I even used that phrase, but there was a website called Project Euler, and it was very mathsy problems and things like that. And you really, there was no feedback. You basically just put the answer that you got in, and you were told if the answer was right or not based on the program that you wrote. Whereas the likes of LeetCode, you have a nice environment. You can you can write it in any language and get it evaluated straight away and told how performant it was and things like that. So environments like that, and it also has a range of problems, so you can have quite easy problems as well that you can work through. And it's not always it's not necessarily about getting the right answer every time or doing it the best way, but it's like a lot of things, a lot of it comes down to just the hours you put in. I would say to my estimation, took on information and learned things a lot more slowly than a lot of my peers, but I actually performed very well in college and was able to do well in exams and things like that, just because I had actually, even though I felt like others would be able to learn things fast, at the same rate or faster than me, I had actually been doing programming for maybe a year or two beforehand. So even though I didn't have any of the knowledge that we were getting in college, I was still actually able to perform very well because I just had that experience. I had just been kind of hitting my head against that wall for a few years longer, and it did make a difference. So focus on learning the functions of things. I mean, like I say, there's absolutely no harm in knowledge and it can be very useful, but I would be focusing on doing the things first and then kind of worrying about the knowledge everywhere. But again, that's just my opinion. That's how I would, or that would be the advice that I give to a younger version of myself. Everyone has their own way of learning, so I would, I'm not necessarily going to push anyone in any particular direction. Of course, you're very welcome anytime. So with that said, let's see if, okay, so there's another area where I hadn't been looking at scope. So let's do some try locks around here as well. And there's an interesting one here in copy. I wonder, could that be causing the issue? We'll see. Okay, yeah. That makes sense. I think a lot of people that probably have gotten a certain amount of experience in this field probably, recognize the importance of just time spent. And I think it's unfortunately similar advice to almost any domain that you can pick, whether that's like exercise, different sciences, any of these kind of fields, singing, dancing, the arts. Most of the time it's really just the hours that you put into doing the thing is the thing that makes the biggest difference. But having said this, I have still ended up with this deadlock. So what is going on? I'm going to have to kill all of these again, and at this point I feel like I need to make a script for just performing these kills, because this is getting quite tedious. Let's see how complicated it would be to write not even a script, but even just automate this slightly. So if I took the last three, no, I want the first three. Do I have to do a +3 here? No, -3. Yeah, so -3 to get the first three. And I think I can do a cut F. If I do F1, no, F2. How do I do a field with cut? Oh, don't do it for money. I mean, money is also good, I think. I'm not sure how I feel about that one. It's great. It's great to do it as as your passion and as something that you enjoy, it's like I would nearly advise anyone, like, now things have gotten more competitive as of late, and I would say, you know, for my job security and for me to be competitive in the job market, I would absolutely say to others, oh yeah, don't get into this just for the money, because that's less jobs for me. But in general, I think it's such a lucrative field. I feel like I think there are lots of people who could get into it and really change their lives for the better just by virtue of the fact that there can be so much money in software development. It would definitely be difficult to do it just for the money if you're not passionate, because you are competing with so many people who live, breathe and eat it. But at the same time, I would, you know, the socialist part of me is like, yeah, absolutely get into it for the money, because there is a lot of money in it. And, you know, there are a lot of people out there struggling, doing much harder jobs for much less money. I I wouldn't put anyone off it for that reason personally, but then that would be kind of getting more into just personal opinions. So yeah, your mileage may vary. Money is very motivating. And like these days, definitely when I was getting started off, and I guess there were, it probably, there felt like there was less risk in general in the world at large when I was starting out. So I would have said money wasn't a big motivator for me and didn't really matter to me that much. It had been told to me that that will change as you get older, and it has. So do keep in mind that it, you know, like money in and of itself, yeah, like they say, can't buy happiness, can't, you know, doesn't solve your problems necessarily, but a lot of things can be solved with money, whether fortunately or unfortunately. That is just the way it is. So, yeah. Oh, lots of things are really sucking at the moment. It feels like it's getting more and more difficult for people to live in general, not just comfortably, but to actually just make ends meet. And that's kind of another one of the reasons why I say, yeah, why not get into coding just for the money, because things are tough and that can make things a little bit easier. And maybe I have to specify a delimiter here. So maybe field 1, and if I say field 2, maybe field 5, 6, 7. Okay, we've got our process IDs. Can we go ahead and kill those 3 times? And we'll look for seed again. No. Nah, that's not really working the way I wanted to. I guess I'll just do it by hand. 14660 14912. Yeah, I mean that's a really nice way of doing things, and I do think people who get into software, we are quite fortunate with how things have been in the last while. It has been a relatively kind of well-paying market. So, oh, what is going on up there? It's just outputting zeros the whole time. But yeah, software could be a good way of doing it. It can be difficult. It can be very frustrating, but so can any job. So it's got a very good number of very positive trade-offs, I would say. Getting into software anyway. Let's see, have I missed any calls to lock? So there's type functions and functions. Those are like the only ones that are left, so I'm not sure. So we'll do try lock and type functions try lock. I'm not feeling too confident about this one, but I'm like, what else can I really do at this point in terms of the try locks? Continue for, it's the same. Or no, if I take a look at the functions that are actually stalling, so we have, let's see, break while and continue while, and those are in features. Maybe I'll just try and pick one of those and examine them. So we'll go continue while, and I'll go ahead and kill all of these processes again. I mean, I would say there's nothing to feel bad about if someone is very passionate about it. At the end of the day, we all need to live, and we all need to be able to earn money so that we can feed ourselves and, you know, put a roof over our heads and all the rest of that. I would say no one is necessarily more entitled to do programming than you are, just because their motives are different, and they might, like you say, they might have more passion about it. Doesn't mean that they're more entitled to a particular job than you. But that can be a difficult concept to kind of battle with, but that's more, I would say, yeah, when a person starts kind of, or when I start thinking more about that kind of stuff, it gets into the realms of kind of mindfulness and meditation and figuring out where those kind of things are coming from. So that's in features and loops. So if I take a look at just loops, maybe, and it was continue while. And it was doing, okay, so it is hanging on the I plus 1. So maybe if I just do a simple test, let's see. I'll put it in variables, and I'll just call the test x. X is equal to 1, x plus equals 1, and then print x, and this will probably hang. The output that we're going to be expecting is 2, but I don't think we're going to get that far. I'm going to rerun this with variables x, and well, I guess that will run because the previously unfinished, or the previously hanging, oh, what's going on there? Oh, that's just a compile, I believe. So 24064, 24065. Okay, that... I'm not sure why that keeps getting highlighted. What's going on there? That's kind of disorientating. Did I press something weird in Tmux? I'm not sure. But anyway, that seems to be working all right. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll just write it like this. So we've got a while loop and we've got an increment on the inside. So maybe there are pieces interacting in a weird way. Yeah, so we just have one test running now. And we're getting the deadlock. Oops. Let's see. Oh, is it just that it's not a deadlock, it's potentially an infinite loop because the value just isn't updating. So yeah, so maybe that could be killed. No, that's gonna keep running. How best to resolve this? Actually, what am I doing? When I ran this last time with just the regular output, it was telling me what I needed to know. It told me that the increment wasn't working. And so I can just focus on solving that bug. Yeah, so we have a standard out of 1 and the output that we actually want is 2. So let's go ahead and see what the issue is. I'll need to change all of those try locks back again as well. Let's try this. Let's see what the value of LHS is before and after the operator assignment. Okay, so beforehand it's 1 and afterwards it's 2. Now, the only thing is when we evaluate that expression, what have we got? We've got a valref with source. It should be doing a lookup. It should be a scope get. and it's returning a v clone, but that should be a v clone of the reference behind the variable should still be fine. Yeah, so it's probably that. Can I do my address lookup here? Okay, so when I get the value from here, the value v is that. Let's try this. Oops. So it's not implemented for valref with source. I'm doing it here. Why can I? Create pointer is not implemented for that. Maybe it's because it needs a reference. Yeah, so it's going to be a different memory location because this is a different reference. So I'm not really getting much information out of that. Maybe if I try and walk through what val expression would do. It would do raw expression var, it would do scopes.get. And it should basically be as simple as that. Then LHS value comes down here. Is there something I'm missing? Maybe if I take a look at what happens in, say, prop assignment. Yeah, all of these things get the slot directly from the namespace that they're being used in, and that's the kind of functionality I was trying to work around with this new implementation of assignment. So if I need to go back to the literal drawing board. Let's see. Can I make some sense of this? I'm going to do a screen share here. Will that connect? Yeah. Okay. Whoops. I took the wrong window. Let's see. So essentially what we're doing at this point in time is we might have a variable x and in memory, in scopes, oops, this is a valref with source, which is essentially a pointer to a value, and we'll say that there's no source in this case. I think I can zoom out a little. There we go. So when we retrieve that from the scope, if we clean that up a little, we have this memory location. So that's going to be nothing. And this is going to be a pointer to this. Okay, and I think I see the problem. So, or do I see the problem? When we do a clone to retrieve it from memory, we're going to do a clone of this, and presumably that will recursively call clone. Let me just... Oh no, for a second there I thought it was an issue because we were performing a copy of the value, but that should be okay for the moment. So we have our local copy of this, so that's going to be LHS val. Can I print out V? Or the address of V, rather. BA0, BA0, yeah. So in both locations, V should be the same reference. Where's our test again? So it was in variables, I guess. Yes, so first of all, but also what? Because, okay, that is, I wasn't expecting that. What am I doing in scope? Okay. That is problematic, potentially. That's the same thing. Yeah, so that worked. It doesn't look like it, but yeah, the value is now 2. I have way too much indirection in this project. So let's try and take it back a little and figure out what's going on here. So when I have a value x, which is a valref with source, and it's pointing to a memory address, this is null. And then I want to perform a set on that. We now have we now have 2 of these guys. I need to shuffle these around a little. And so this will be y, this will be some other memory location, and this will be some other value. So what are we doing down here? We are doing like this. Let's say that this is y prime, which is a copy of y. That's fine. We can basically say it's y for the purposes of this, in my opinion. What we had been doing before is x is equal to y prime, or copy of y. So in the context of our drawing, was that just saying that there's now an entirely new x? Well, no, it's the same x, but the values are being replaced. So I'm getting rid of that, and we can ignore the source, but we're getting rid of that. No, that's not what was happening. Because it was replacing... Oh, because It was the copy of y. Well, that shouldn't matter because we'd still be pointing to the new value. And that's not what was happening. This is very tricky because it's fine that it's working now, but it's not good that I don't fully understand. Like, I believe I understand why the solution is working, but there's so many levels of indirection that I don't have a good grasp of why the original wasn't working, which isn't great. But regardless, what I'll do, well, first of all, I'll plug in my charger and I'll check, are the rest of the test passing first of all. You did the first part of your assignment and it's working, and now you're lost. Lost in what way? Okay, so we've got 2 test failures here. Property assignment 4 and okay, operator assignment makes sense because that's not an error anymore. You can have a, well, you can have lots of things on the left hand side, but it shouldn't allow just anything on the left hand side. Like, you can't have just a variable, or you can't have just a number on the left hand side. So I'm going to have some kind of a limitation here. Property assignment 4, object doesn't contain age though. That's very strange. And that's happening on line 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's probably because of what I did with this. Let's try that. Don't know what to do for the next part. I mean, in terms of you have the problem, but you're not sure what the solution for the next part is. So let's see if, well, if y is, or if the source is none, then we don't need to do anything for the next part. So if let sum, and we'll try that, try s, and lots of very ugly looking code at the moment, but we can tidy that up later. Okay, yeah. That sounds quite tricky. I would say that is unfortunately part of the difficulty, is that there's going to be times when you're lost, and yeah, it's unfortunately part of the process as well. I guess there are a couple of things that I like to do when I'm feeling lost. Taking a break can often help, taking a walk, so that your subconscious is kind of working on it in the background. I feel like ChatGPT can sometimes be useful as kind of a rubber duck. So you kind of work with it and walk through the problem. But yeah, unfortunately, that is part of the process as well, is getting lost and figuring out how to go through that. So best of luck with it. It sounds challenging. So we have try lock here. So that's on Y. I'm going to just make this super messy just to see, does it even work? And this was X source, I think. Yeah, well, it's good to identify that shortcoming of ChatGPT, because there are a number of issues with ChatGPT, especially in terms of, number one, if you're getting the solution from ChatGPT, then you're not actually resolving the problem yourself. And similarly, the code that ChatGPT can generate can be problematic as well. So it's worth considering how you can use ChatGPT as a tool rather than kind of, like you say, using it to copy the solution. So consider how you can, like I say, work with it as a rubber duck. So you're not necessarily asking it for the answer, but you're asking it questions about the process. Similarly, it can be, some people even just have a doll or a teddy or something that they ask verbal questions to, and you can find that just the process of articulating your problem correctly can even give the solution itself sometimes. Pretty much getting solutions from the example that my teacher has. I mean, that's a viable approach as well. If the teacher has provided examples and you are able to tweak them to get to a solution, that is part of the process. I mean, so many of us prior to ChatGPT in particular, consider ourselves as kind of glorified Stack Overflow researchers. So you get stuck on a problem, you Google it, you find a Stack Overflow question that kind of gets close to what your problem is, and you copy paste it. It might not work the way you want it, so then you start fiddling with the results, and that is a valuable part of the process. That's it comes down to not reinventing the wheel. I guess the tricky part is making sure that you actually understand what the code is doing after you copy it, and when you modify it, why it's working. But that is, again, part of the process. So consider borrowing here. Okay, so we still have the same issue. It's interesting, as has often been the way with this project, that there are some tests that are passing and some tests that are failing, and it can be difficult to identify why the ones that are failing and why there aren't more failures. Like, it's not necessarily the problem for me isn't necessarily the fact that there's one failure as such. It's why aren't there, if this test is going to fail, why aren't there more failures, is the kind of conundrum for me at the moment. And then for the operator assignment error, that's just that the error isn't being raised. So there are a couple of issues there. Like I said, one of the biggest of which is just the fact that the code that's now working somewhat makes sense, but it's still not clear to me why the code that isn't working wasn't working. So I think I would have to take a little bit more of a look at that before I feel confident enough to proceed with anything like a solution. And furthermore, there is this one niggling issue as well in terms of the object doesn't contain the property age, which is likely a similar story to what we saw before in terms of the clones and references and things like that. But that basically brings us nicely up to the 2 hour mark. So I'm going to leave that there for today. It was still a good amount of progress. Well, most of the progress today was just cleaning up the work that had been done in previous streams and getting that committed. But we're on to finally back to the challenge of operator assignment, and we have gotten a few steps forward in that, and we do have a largely working solution, but with one test failing. Now, I'm glad that there was a test failure. If there is going to be an issue with this code, I'm glad it's been flagged. But the 2 outstanding problems are, number 1, why is that test failing? And number 2, why is the solution that's there working when the solution that was there previously isn't working, or wasn't working, shall we say. So with that in mind, I'm going to leave it there for today. Thanks as always to everyone who's watching, everyone who's chatting in and commenting, and talk to you again. Take care.